This is the second video introducing the ancient city of Megiddo. One of the defensive features of this city was the construction of an enormous grain silo, 450 cubic meters. This would help the inhabitants sustain a considerable siege. Some suggest that due to the evidence of significant stables, that the grain would have been needed to sustain the horses that were kept here. This is the silo, and of interest is the fact that it has a stairway, an interior stairway descending, and there's actually a mirrored stairway on the left side that's not pictured here. Excavators found straw embedded between parts of the stones, suggesting indeed that this was used for grain. There's a significant cultic location on Megiddo, and it was used for religious functions at various times during the life of the city. One of the prominent features has to do with a circular altar. You can just barely see in the Google Earth picture on the right a roundish dot. It's very difficult to see on the poster, the actual photo on the left. Here's what it looks like. As you can see, there are several steps leading up to it. It exceeds 8 meters in diameter, and the extant height is 1.4 meters. We're not sure what the original ultimate height was, as it's likely that stones were harvested from it for other building projects. A moment ago, we referred to some stables. There are northern stables and southern stables. You'll notice the comment that these northern ones are located near Palace 6000. This designation of a palace can help us orient ourselves when that shows up on some of the sketches. Draw your attention to the reddish-brown ink and the 3 or 4 actually parallel walls. 2 of the interior walls there on the left seem to be almost perforated, so there are some pillars that go up and then some openings. These are thought to be horse stalls. At right angles at the back is the city wall. Here's an archaeologist's sketch of that area. You'll notice right in the middle is 6000. This is a palace, and the northern stables are to the left of them. Using blue lines, that indicates some of the interior and exterior walls of the stables, and then red indicates the city walls to the back of them. In the aerial shot then, the blue lines help you locate where the stable walls are, and the red lines indicate the city walls. The arrow is positioned to orient you for the next slide. So imagine yourself standing at the point of the arrow and looking out over the stables and then to the territory down the hill. That's the orientation of the next photo. Here you are standing at the point of that arrow and then looking out diagonally across the stables and then to the farmland below. So here are walls associated with the stables and walls associated with the city wall. Same general area, just shifting the view a little bit to the right. Here is another photo, and you can see some of the upright pillars that seem to be dividing stall zones. My understanding is the reason we don't see this layout now is they have excavated much of this away so that the city wall would be to our left on this photo. Admittedly, I'm not positive of that, My main rationale is that in the upper right, it looks like we have more of the mound. And as you may recall, that would indicate the lower part of the stables, whereas on the left side it would fall away and we wouldn't have any habitation there. The mound itself falls away. There are stables in the south of the mound as well. They are known as the structure or building 1576 in some of the archaeological sketches. When the Oriental Institute from University of Chicago engaged their work, one of the things they did was to cut a very deep trench, a narrow, somewhat narrow and deep trench, reaching down at points to bedrock. The fact that it's still visible helps us to appreciate this particular aspect of the University of Chicago's excavation. Here then is a site sketch by archaeologists showing us the layer 4A and 4B and then reaching down to 5A. So it's that as though we were freezing time at that slice. Perhaps you already then oriented based on earlier conversation to recognize some of the features. You can see the gate there at the top. Notice then the palace, structure 6000, and we were using that to orient where the northern stables are. They would have been to the left of the palace. Southern stables are structure 1576 that you see in the lower left, and then far lower left, you'll recognize that square is intended to indicate the descending depression of the water shaft with the subterranean access to the spring. Thus far, you've gotten acquainted with the location of the site, a little bit of the history, what happened at the site, this city, and also some of the major architectural features of it. Let's turn our attention now to learn who it was, what groups have engaged in excavations there. 1903 to 5, Schumacher, and this was with a German group. They cut a north-south trench. That's not the eastern trench of the Oriental Institute of Chicago, but a north-south trench. So you can see 20 to 25 meters wide, all across the whole length of the mound. They got as far as Middle Bronze 2, and in places down to bedrock. The literature refers to a couple of significant discoveries, a couple of artifacts, 2 seals. One that reads belonging to Shema, servant of Jeroboam. Sounds like it belongs to the biblical era. And another one belonging to Asaph. We know one Asaph that was leader of the musical worship at the temple. Whether or not it's that Asaph or someone else, we don't know for sure. Then comes the excavation by the Oriental Institute of University of Chicago, 1925 to 39, and you see the names of a series of principal directors, Fisher, Guy, and Loud. Their initial aim, with some external funding, was to peel away the entire mound, layer by layer, so to do an exhaustive excavation. You can see how far they got. They cleared away the first millennium, so getting back to about 1000 BC. And they did that across the entire top of the mound. And then they realized that their ambitions were just a little bit too big. They weren't not going to be able to do exhaustive excavation. And so you see the mention of the deep trench down to bedrock on the east side, and that was that dark slice on the right side of one of the earlier shots. That's the Oriental Institute. About 20 years later, Hebrew University sponsored Yigael Yadin, and he engaged in some soundings. That would be just piercing some holes, some fairly narrow explorations in order to get a sense of the stratigraphy at the Iron Age. In the early 90s, Israel Finkelstein and David Usishkin from Tel Aviv turned their attention to Megiddo. In particular, they were re-examining some Iron Age strata, and that spans strata 6A and then reaching up to strata 3. This photo captures some of the figures that were interested in the University of Chicago dig. Photo dates to 1929. Notice James Breasted. He is the leader of the Oriental Institute. How much time he actually spent on this site, I'm not sure, but he is a heavy hitter in culture of the ancient Near East, leading the Oriental Institute from Chicago. And then you notice some Rockefellers, sponsors of this dig. I'd like to point out that this photo and artifact photos that you'll see so designated are from a magnificent book by Novacek. It's issued by the Oriental Institute, and you can look at it online, either purchase or just to view for personal use. Magnificent, magnificent book. At this point, we'll attempt to give a history of the site, indicating some of the major developments that correspond to particular slices of history. As you can see, it revealed 20 strata. So with stratum 1 being the newest and stratum 20 being the earliest. At stratum 20, some remains of a Neolithic or Chalcolithic sort. Strata 15 through 19 belong to the early Bronze Age. Noteworthy here are two items. One is a city wall, which archaeologists comment it was the largest and strongest wall ever built on the mound. In addition, the round altar that you saw, 8 meters across and 1.4 meters high extant, that was built in the early Bronze era. When we come to the Middle Bronze era, this governs stratum 10 through 14. One of the features discovered at this point was a row of 3 houses, and it's noteworthy that they were built on the following plan. They each involved a central courtyard, and then that courtyard had a perimeter encircling it with rooms. Of those 3 houses, the westernmost one had 10 rooms, and in the middle of the courtyard was a cistern. So a remarkable development. Archaeologists uncovered parallel streets that surrounded square blocks of houses in this area, which suggests some city planning. From stratum 9, then ascending up into stratum 6, we find ourselves in the late Bronze era. It's during this time, in the mid to early 1400s, that Pharaoh Thutmose III engages a campaign, including a siege of Megiddo. It's thought that stratum 9, which evidences a destruction, may indicate when it was that Thutmose conquered that area. Later on, when we examine artifacts, we'll be especially interested in the Megiddo ivories. These are small and very delicate carvings. Those were found underneath one of the buildings in a cellar, which has been nicknamed the Treasury because of the riches that were found there. And that belongs to the late Bronze era. This was a period of Egyptian control. The Amarna letters referred to earlier are witness to that Egyptian sovereignty, since the ruler of Megiddo appeals to the pharaoh for military aid. In his encyclopedia article, Yigael Yadin writes concerning the end of stratum 7a, the settlement of stratum 7a was brought to an end by a sudden and total destruction. This is shown not only by the fact that the following stratum, that would be 6b, is totally unlike stratum 7a, but by the signs of devastation wrought upon the 7a buildings, and by the numerous objects, parenthetically the ivories and pottery from the 7a sanctuary, found strewn over the floors of this level. He continues, if the pedestal bearing the cartouche of Ramses VI does indeed belong to stratum 7a, then the end of this stratum can be dated to approximately 1130 BCE. The rule of Ramses VI was from 1143 to 1136. In the next video, we'll continue with Iron Age. In the next video, we'll continue this survey with the Iron Age.